Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Okay, everybody, are you guys ready? You guys ready? It is time. It is time to learn what this mystery trial is going to be. I'm super excited. Look at this screen. Is that not suspenseful? Oh, what trial is it? What trial is this? So time has come. DSN's ready. Awesome. Y'all, I'm super excited. So shout out to DSN. Shout out to all my homies who were here. Is homies even still a word? Who were here last night for the Depp Be Heard extravaganza as per usual. Okay. A couple words about what the plan is for right now. So we're going to be watching episode 1. And for anyone who didn't hear this bit, this entire trial is not available on YouTube. Only a handful of witnesses are available on YouTube. So in order to find this trial, Gavel-To-Gavel, I went into the Court TV archives and got it from there and did what I do, worked my scroll magic, and edited it and made into video files the way I did with Murdoch and other things, you know. So this is a YouTube first that anybody has ever, well, this is a YouTube first that this trial even is going to be available on YouTube, Gavel-To-Gavel, but also it's YouTube first that there's going to be commentary and analysis, Gavel-To-Gavel. So we are making history, my friends. We are making history. Shout out to your planner girl. So I'm sorry you're not feeling well. I've been getting eaten alive by mosquitoes lately. I hate that mosquitoes might make me sometimes think about you. It's a terrible association, I know. But don't worry. It's also great things like pens, orchids, good associations too. So, okay. So then the other thing is this, that there's not, you know, what's available in the Court TV archives is all there is. So I did try to get court documents. Turns out in this particular state, I almost said the state, good job me for not saying state. In this particular state, you have to be there in person. You cannot just get the court documents online. Even if you do FOIA, it looks like that's not going to work. Like, you have to be there in person. So if we end up having a squirrel of the world in this particular state and they are local and they feel so inclined and they want to pop on over there and get these court documents, then, dude, they will be my hero. Shout out to Candace. So, you know, I've heard that the boy mosquitoes are okay. It's the girl mosquitoes that are the bad ones and the boys are fine. So, you know, and then the other thing is that as far as the audio is concerned, the audio for this trial actually is great. And so is the video quality. Like, it's actually really good, apart from the opening statements, because the attorneys, as they are wont to do, are wandering around all over Tarnation away from the microphones. Okay. So basically, the way that I have it situated is for the opening statements, I have the sound just kind of turned down, because otherwise it's like the background noise or whatever, like the buzzing, you know, is really loud. It's really loud. So in order to not have that hurt everybody's eardrums. I almost said earballs. I just turned the sound down. You should still be able to hear the attorneys, but it just shouldn't be as painful. But in other words, it's the type of thing where it's like you probably will just get used to it or whatever. But then after the opening statements, the attorneys go back to their homes and their microphones, and you can hear everything great. So so my plan is this. Look at this, DSN for the win. One person's mosquito is another person's short nuts. I was going to say that's what I always say, but I've never said it, but I will start saying it from now on. That's a brilliant saying. Excelente. So I'm going to start rolling the intro video, and then we're going to talk about a couple things, and then we're going to get started. So, okay, here we go, guys. It's the intro video. Look at that nice forest. By the way, that's the redwood forest in California. Why? It's going to be applicable to this trial. So Squangwin's just chilling. That Squangwin's just chilling all over the place, right, man? So another thing I was going to say, so my plan here for these opening statements is to, and we're going to watch the opening statements and we're going to see the first couple witnesses, okay? So my plan for the opening statements is I'm going to try to not interrupt. And my plan is after the, that's right, DSN, there we go. We're going to have some nice cheese. Look at how pretty, though, picturesque. Some sports ball shit going on there. You guys can see sports ball. Shout out to sports ball. So yeah, so I'm gonna try to not interrupt the opening statements. And my plan is that after the state, right, we'll pause, we'll take a break, and we'll talk about things. We'll talk about our thoughts and what, you know, and everything, right? Now, can't guarantee that now. If you guys have questions or if I have something that I really want to say, like, of course, I'll probably pause it. But my goal is going to be to try to not do that. And then we're going to watch the defense. Now, one thing I will say that's really interesting is that the prosecution, aka the state, their opening statements are really brief. Y'all, I'm super excited. This is crazy, right? The prosecution's opening statements are very short and very to the point. And the defense is really, really long. I mean, not overly long. Like, it's just more like in line with what you would expect for a trial of this magnitude in terms of when you look at, like, the evidence, the charges, the sentence, you know, the stakes, you know, what's at stake, right? And how long the trial is, things like that. Like, in other words, the defense opening statement is probably more about like what you normally have in terms of the length versus those states is very short. So I'm really excited, though. So that's all I'm going to say ahead of time about the opening statements is that the sound is not great because of them being away from the microphones, but it does, by the way, that is actually a cup of coffee or a coffee drink from the coffee shop that is relevant in this trial. That is from the actual place. So, but that will improve after the opening statements, but you still will be able to hear everything. It's, you know, oh, you're going to learn. Super Planner wants to know how it relates to the coffee. You're going to learn. I'm so excited. Yeah. So also in the thumbnail, oh, look at that, Into the Wild. Gee, I wonder how that's related. We're going to find out. In the thumbnail, there's some things too you'll notice once we get into it. Super Planner Girl is Googling, trying to figure out the trial. Yeah, I made sure not to put anything super obvious there that would give it away. Had I not blocked out the name in the way that I did, there's something in the thumbnail that might have given you a hint to where you the house. Oh, I forgot I did that. To where it would have been Googleable. But you might be able to see that once it's revealed, you'll see what I'm talking about on the wall of the courtroom. I edited something from a clock and I made it into something from the coffee shop. But just by happenstance, the way it's redacted, if you will, blocks that out. So it wouldn't have been easy to find out. So Super Planner Girl, I'm really curious. What were you searching for to try to find out? Were you searching for like trials related to coffee, or I'm really curious. Wow, well done. Super Planner Girl. Bravo. I was not able to even make out a date. Good job on that, man. She was able to make out a date in the journal. Beautiful. And the journal is the actual journal that's in evidence. It belongs to the victim. Okay. And so I took that. You guys, when we get to that point, you'll see that journal only appears on screen like that for a split second, man, for the whole trial. And so it was not easy. I had to pause it right on the right spot and get to the right frame so I could have the best view. And then I had to edit out the defense attorney's hand. But that's the real deal. Wow. Interesting. 2007. I bet it was 2017. I don't know. I didn't look at the date, but I would say that's probably the case because, yeah, if I did guess. But good job on that, though. And what's funny is the title on the spine of the journal is impossible to make out, isn't it? Great point, right? That could be why. That could be why. Yeah, this trial takes place in 2019, or rather, okay, sorry. The crime, the murder, takes place in actually, I believe 2017, actually, and then the trial is 2019. So maybe that explains it. With if you're off by a decade there, that sign right there, by the way, is in the thumbnail. I replaced the clock on the wall of the courtroom. I replaced the clock with that exact sign, which is this coffee house right here. But it's really subtle and easy to miss, especially with the redaction in front. This is the actual menu of the beverages available at Racy's, which is going to be a big theme here in this. So, all right, guys, you all ready? Let's do it. I'm so excited. Oh my God. Okay, let me pull it up. That's a perfect place to pause this. And now let's do a swoop. Let's do Big Fan of Justice swoop, because I feel like that's appropriate. Where is it? Oh, here it is.
But you'll agree with me, justice in general is a good thing?
Big fan of justice.
Fair. Me too. No further questions.
With that said, let's all be big fans of justice. And let's get started.
It's the house.
Here we go, guys.
This case is about an extreme anger and a twisted form of love.
That's the defendant.
A love so dangerous that the defendant killed Alexander Woodworth in an attempt to recapture the relationship she wanted with Jason Mingle. This is not a case of whodunit. The person who done it, the person who brutally killed Alex by stabbing him over and over again, is sitting before you today. The defendant, Ezra McCandless. The defendant that acted on March 22nd, 2018 is not the meek, mild, fearful girl that you might want to see. Throughout this trial, you will see who the real defendant was. So who was Alex and how did Alex and the defendant meet? Alex wasn't your typical 24-year-old. He had a Bachelor of Science degree from UW-Eau Claire with a major in philosophy and a minor in biology. At the time of his death, he was applying to graduate schools to fulfill his lifelong dream of obtaining his PhD and becoming a professor in philosophy. In many ways, reading philosophy and writing about philosophy was a big part of Alex's life. Alex spent hours upon hours reading books, reading different philosophy books, and writing about those interpretations in his journals. In fact, those journals will be used in this trial in an attempt to show that the defendant was afraid of Alex. However, when you don't take bits and pieces out of context, when you read the whole journals, you will realize that these are philosophical musings of a young man who wanted to be a philosophy professor. And in fact, the evidence will show that it was the defendant who sought out Alex on the date of his death. Not once, but twice that day. Alex spent most of his days at Racy's coffee shop in Eau Claire. Some would say it's the place he felt most at home, where he felt safe. He was going to Racy's through college. He would sit there all day, reading books, drinking coffee, writing in his journals. Most of his friends were from the Racy's crowd, and he also worked at Racy's coffee shop. Unfortunately for Alex, that's also the same place where he met the person who would later take his life. The defendant and Alex met in October of 2017, and shortly thereafter began dating. Also, unfortunately for Alex,
There you go, Super Planner Girl 2017. There you go, Dr. Bob. We're glad you're here. Glad you're here. We just got started. For anyone who's just joining us, I would recommend you do like Kitsmiths and back up a little bit and try to catch up just so that way you're on, because we just got started, but just so that way you are filled in with what's happening.
the defendant was involved in a complex series of other relationships. At the time, she was involved in a relationship with Jason Mengel, and later she was also involved in an intimate relationship with John Hansen. You will hear information regarding these relationships throughout this trial in the months leading up to Alex's death. And the reason why you are hearing these is to gain insight into the defendant's state of mind and what drove her to her actions on March 22nd. In February of 2018, Jason Mengel learned of the defendant's relationship with John Hansen. He learned that while he was away from military training, the defendant had an intimate relationship with his good friend John Hansen.
Man, that's rough.
He also learned that the defendant had an intimate relationship with Alex. And Jason Mengel confronted the defendant about that. And she responded by saying that Alex had taken advantage of her. And after these relationships came to light, the defendant's relationship with Jason Mengel ended. And the defendant's life began to spiral out of control. She had to move back to Stanley, Wisconsin, a place she did not want to be. She had to live with her parents, where she was away from the art scene in Eau Claire, away from her friends at Racy's coffee shop, and most importantly, she was away from the love of her life.
By the way, Eau Claire sounds like it's a really cool place, just from what I've learned from this
The
trial.
love of the man that she was truly obsessed with, Jason Mengel. In her journals, she describes her relationship with Jason Mengel as an ancient love so powerful that it scares them both. The defendant then began to blame Alex for her relationship problems with Jason Mengel.
By the way, guys, there's going to be a lot of overlap here with Debt Be Heard, but it's all worse. But one of the things that I think is so interesting is think about the journaling thing, right? In Debt Be Heard, and how, like, to me, that's like so weird, right? The love journal and shit, like whatever. It's like the letters and blah, blah. While there is not a journal that's that cringy in this case, journaling is still a huge part of it. And there is, as you can see in the thumbnail, a handwritten actual physical journal. And that's a big part of this trial as well. But there's a lot of other overlap that's kind of uncanny, by the way. So we'll see as we go through. You got it. Okay, cool, Kitsmiths. Yes. Yeah, kids, you're right. It is. Well, and honestly, I've been saying that for a long time. But yes, Kitsmiths is correct about why I included Wisconsin. Yes. Sorry, I should say that correctly. Wisconsin, they say.
Around February 24th of 2018, the defendant sent a message to Alex instructing him to not talk to her ever again. And Alex obeyed that demand. From February 24th to the date of his death on March 22nd, there was no communication between the two of them. Instead, it was the defendant who sought out Alex. In an interview to law enforcement, the defendant was asked, what was so important that you had to see Alex that day? And she explained that she had a heating pad and a bookmark that she had to return to Alex. And despite returning those items to Alex, she insisted on going someplace in nature to talk. You will hear that the defendant's acts on March 22nd, 2018 were particularly unusual. And I have a timeline of events to show you, and I realize it will be hard for you to read these, but it's more of an aid to help me, but you will be able to...
I like her blazer.
should be able to at least see the pictures. So on that day,
All right, we got an activity.
the defendant
Very good. Love it.
So
Very
on
good.
that day,
Yeah.
the defendant ends up taking her car, despite being specifically told by her dad not to drive. And despite her dad hiding her car keys, she takes her keys, or finds her keys, and somehow drives to Eau Claire.
Now, I will say that there's, the thing about the car and not being able or not supposed to drive. I feel like I don't know that we're going to ever really learn more about that. My gut feeling is this. My gut feeling is that she had a restricted license for some reason. I don't know why. And there was a motion in limine, because from what I've learned so far, that never really gets answered. And again, unfortunately, we don't have access to the court documents. Now that we can reveal the state, for any squirrel friends of the world, now or in the future, anybody who's in Wisconsin, if you feel like going to Eau Claire, getting a cup of coffee at Racy's, because like that coffee, this one right here, hold on, this coffee right here looks amazing. So like, can't blame you for wanting to go there. But if you feel so inclined and you want to go in person, you can have access to those court records, and then we can learn. But my guess is there's a motion in limine. But as far as I know, that's as much as they go into it, is basically she's not supposed to be driving, to the extent that her dad took her keys away and like said you can't drive or whatever. And it sounds like it's not just being a dick. It's like she's not supposed to drive type thing. Hi, Abby, you're here just in time for our brand new Gavel-To-Gavel, and you might want to do like some of the other school friends are doing and start at the beginning and catch up on 2 times speed, just as a recommendation.
And she is seen on the traffic cameras
Right, Naisha?
in the city of Eau Claire, in an area near Alex's apartment at 10:43 a.m. She's seen again at approximately 10:50 a.m. And law enforcement were able to identify the defendant's car, as it's rather distinctive, as it has a number of drawings on it. At approximately 10:53 a.m., she arrives at Racy's coffee shop. And when she arrives at Racy's coffee shop, she sees Jason Mengel before she goes inside. And Jason Mengel will later tell you that he sees a fire in her eyes. The defendant then goes inside Racy's coffee shop, buys a cup of coffee, and leaves a tip. While for most defendants that wouldn't be unusual, for this defendant, she very rarely paid for her coffee. She either got free coffee or got someone else to buy it for her. And she certainly never left a tip. The person serving her coffee that day describes her appearance as different, in that she was disheveled, she wasn't wearing makeup. The defendant then leaves and goes to Max Martinson's house to do some sort of art exchange. And then she comes back to Racy's. And during this time, her ex sort of boyfriend, they were on shaky ground, gets particularly concerned. He recalls seeing this fire in her eyes, and he has a bad feeling. He also realized that the defendant had been doing some journaling about feeling taken advantage of and feeling like she had been assaulted. Jason also remembered that the defendant said that she felt like her voice had been taken and she wanted to get her voice back. So Jason Mingle, he gets concerned and he decides to go on his bike and he starts to head to John Hansen's house. And as he goes to John Hansen's house, he remembers, oh no, John Hansen moved, so he goes to Alex's house. So he rides his bike to Alex's house, and when he arrives, he sees the defendant's car in the driveway at Alex's house. The car is running, the door is open, and music is playing. Jason Mingle gets concerned again. So he decides to go sort of across the street from where Alex's house is. He's sitting at a picnic table, smoking some cigarettes, and then he decides, I'm going to go in Alex's house. So he goes in Alex's house and learns that everything's okay. And as he's exiting Alex's house, he is confronted by the Eau Claire police. So a janitor who had watched Jason Mingle while he was smoking some cigarettes thought this was unusual. So the police come, and Jason Mingle describes to them, this bad feeling, the fire in her eyes. And then the police go and talk to the defendant and Alex. And the defendant specifically tells the police, everything's fine. She doesn't mention that she's afraid of Alex or fearful of Alex. And so the police leave, and the defendant leaves Alex's house at approximately 1:05 p.m. The defendant's in the driver's seat, and Alex is in the passenger seat. And Alex would never be seen again. At approximately 1:25 p.m., Chester Davidson, a man who was driving to work on 430th Avenue, describes seeing a vehicle at approximately 1:25 p.m. blocking his lane of traffic, such that he's traveling on 430th Avenue and he needs to kind of weave around this vehicle. And he describes seeing a female in the passenger seat, a female in the driver's seat, and a male in the passenger seat. It's not until 3 hours later, or almost 3 hours later, at 4:15 p.m. that the defendant is seen again. So let's take a look at what this nature location was where the defendant took Alex that day. So this was a narrow field drive.
Wow, look at that,
In a
guys.
very rural part of Dunn County.
Wow.
A place where no one.
So I'm going to pause it. So Dunn County. So that's also our location. We're going to be at the Dunn County Courthouse. Look at that. Wow. I think it's funny that they call it the nature location. But wow. It gives me goosebumps. Does it give you guys goosebumps, that picture? I don't know why. It just looks like somebody died there. Like, even if I didn't know anything, I'd be like, something bad happened there. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I don't know. Sometimes I get instincts like that about things. Do you guys ever?
Could see or hear what was going on. So approximately 4:15. Well, what happens between those 3 hours? From 1:25 to 4:15. The defendant.
Dr. Bob is asking what the charges are. Dr. Bob, the charges are murder. Murder most foul. Yeah, first-degree murder. I don't think Wisconsin has the death penalty. So at stake is life without parole. Or I think maybe also life with parole, potentially. But it's first-degree murder.
Brutally stabs Alex.
You're welcome.
Takes the knife she used.
Yeah,
Takes
her
Alex.
right there. By the way, guys, if you want to take a look, I updated the thumbnail. It should be up there with the reveal. But you can see what she looked like before being in jail, because this is a hipster. We're talking about a hipster here, guys. And you guys can see in the thumbnail. Like, actually, let's see if I can pull it up real quick. Actually, no, I take it back. I'll pull up the revealed thumbnail during the break after the prosecution finishes, and that way, we can all talk about it. But yeah, that's her right there, right? She is very well spoken. I agree. Yes.
his phone and goes to Don Sippel's house, about a half a mile away. She ditches the phone and knife, though, before she goes and sees Don Sippel. And she makes contact with Don Sippel and asks him to call a doctor. Well, Don Sippel decides to call the police. And when the police arrive, the defendant can provide very little information. She's eventually able to provide her name as Monica Carlin. She's able to describe that she's been attacked by an unknown person or persons. And she can't provide much other information than that. But when asked if there's anyone they can call, she's able to say the name Jason Mengel. So the defendant's taken by ambulance to Mayo for an evaluation. And during that evaluation, she's examined from head to toe for any injuries. And the injuries that Dr. Tillotson, or wounds if you want to call them that, I guess, that Dr. Tillotson observes are some scratch marks on her left forearm.
Okay.
That have the words B-O-Y.
I'm going to back that up. This is where shit gets really weird, okay? Let me back it up just a second, okay?
Or wounds, if you want to call them that, I guess, that Dr. Tillotson observes are some scratch marks on her left forearm that have the words B-O-Y carved into her arm.
Right.
On her left palm, 3 slight superficial lacerations or scratches on the palm of her hand. On the right outer thigh, 3 linear scratches, or not 3, but some linear scratches on the right outer thigh. A red mark along her jawline that's not there 2 days later. And some scratches near her underwear or crotch area. Dr. Tillotson describes these as self-inflicted scratches or wounds on the defendant. The defendant also undergoes a sexual assault exam. Pretty long, takes a number of hours for this examination. And during that sexual assault exam, she's again unable to provide very little information. But when asked, how did this B-O-Y get carved into your arm? The defendant states, Alex did that to me. When asked what's the last thing she remembers, she states, being at a park with Alex with a frog statue. Remember that the defendant states she's right-handed and that the alleged wounds are within arm's reach of a right-handed person. The defendant is then talked to by Deputy Emmer Shields and Officer Corey Reeves of the Eau Claire Police Department. And she again tells them that Alex carved boy into her arm. And the last thing she remembers is being at a park with a frog statue. And Officer Reeves from Eau Claire realizes or believes that this is Owen Park. The next day, on March 23rd, 2018, the Eau Claire Police...
Kidsmiths? Good question. We'll talk about that. Yep. Good job. Kidsmiths is paying attention, you guys. Well done on that. Yep, Monica, you're right. She says Monica. We'll talk about it.
Department gets concerned. Alex is missing. And so Detective Prock goes and talks to the defendant. And during that interview with the defendant, she is less than forthcoming. She's able to describe what happened earlier in the day. And then she's able to describe leaving Alex's house. But after that, she says everything just kind of goes blank for her. She remembers being scared and walking to Don Sippel's house. She has no idea. She makes no mention of stabbing Alex, no mention of Alex being by her car. And so Detective Prock, after that interview, decides to go back to Don Sippel's house. He and some other investigators decide to be proactive and try to find Alex. And they see that narrow dirt road. And as they go down that dirt road, oops, sorry, wrong one. Look, it's on the screen.
These are colors, man.
They see Alex's body hanging out of the back of the vehicle.
Oh, trigger warning. Sorry, guys.
And so Detective Proc decides he's going to go talk to the defendant again. So they begin their interview, and Detective Proc asks about the defendant's relationship with Alex. And the defendant describes that they were friends, and then their relationship turned sexual. And even though it was consensual, they had a consensual sexual relationship, it just felt wrong to her. She's unable to provide some information how Alex was calling her the wrong pronouns. Where she used to have more, or I guess be called by more masculine pronouns, but now she was identifying with more female pronouns. But Alex was continuing to use the masculine pronouns. And then Detective Proc asked her again about the boy, B-O-Y, carved into her arm. So let's take a listen and see what she has to say about that.
911 call.
Alex been talking using pronouns that weren't my pronouns.
What again?
I used to go by more original pronouns in high school and more masculine pronouns. I talked to him briefly about it, how I was kind of going through identity things.
I'm going to back this up because I said 911 call. I meant to say this is from the interview. Let me back it up a second. So they're talking about, this is really important, guys, with the pronouns. Okay. So she's used different pronouns.
So let's take a listen and see what she has to say about that.
And Alex been talking using pronouns that weren't my pronouns.
What again?
I used to go by more neutral pronouns in high school and more masculine pronouns. I talked to him briefly about it, how I was kind of going through identity things.
Okay.
But now I go by her pronouns because that's how I feel comfortable.
Okay.
But he kept using the he pronouns because he preferred it.
Okay.
And he used to call me a boy a lot and stuff like that. And I was just kind of like, I don't really identify that way anymore.
Okay.
Because like I identify kind of feminine and stuff because in the past I just kind of was more masculine for kind of my self-protection.
Okay. And so what? So this injury. So what?
So remember, why does this matter, guys? Well, she has the word boy carved into her arm, right?
Happened? How did this get? I guess the way you described it is like on one of your arms.
Yeah.
Something happened. What happened there?
I remember, like, that's when my anxiety got really bad, is because I remember just kind of being really uncomfortable because I don't like it when people look at me.
Okay.
I remember just kind of like being grabbed, and then it just kind of, like, the anxiety went crazy, like, completely through the roof. The anxiety went up.
Okay.
And then sometimes when that happens, it's just like everything goes black for a while.
Okay. So where were you when you were grabbed?
I was in the car.
Okay. And how did he grab you?
Grabbed me by the arm, like right there.
Okay. Where was he?
He was in the passenger. He was in the driver's. I was in the passenger. I don't know if, I think we probably were parked.
Okay.
I think it was before we started driving again.
Okay.
And it was just because I remember it happening, like being grabbed and just feeling hurt and anxious, and then it just starts getting really, really dark, fuzzy for me. Just feeling so anxious.
Okay.
You guys, is anybody having flashbacks to Australia right now, in a way?
And so how does your arm get cut up?
Alex, like, he grabbed it, and then he kept telling me about being a boy and stuff like that, how frustrating it is. And then he threatened me.
What do you mean he threatened you?
He didn't say he was
Well, that was interesting,
gonna do
right?
something, but
I'm going to back that up again. The way she says that is really interesting to me. Hold on. the way she says, and he threatened me. Hold on, let me back that up.
Threatened me.
What do you mean he threatened you?
He didn't say he was gonna do something, but he grabbed me and started doing something.
What do you mean he started doing something?
He started like carving something into my arm.
Where is this? On your arm?
His arm.
Can I see?
And so after that conversation, Detective Prock asked asked the defendant, I know you had a sexual assault exam. Do you believe that you were sexually assaulted? And the defendant responds, well, she doesn't know. She just...
One of the questions I have is, after this incident, did you do anything to yourself?
And so he asked her about,
right.
Do you think you were sexually assaulted? And the defendant says,
Right.
well, I don't know. I just thought that maybe I was sexually assaulted because my pants were cut near my crotch area. And then Detective Prock
By the way,
confronts
guys,
the defendant.
I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna just put out like a blanket trigger warning because there's gonna be a lot of things that come up. And the thing is because again, this hasn't been available in its entirety on YouTube. And the first time I'm seeing a lot of this is as I'm going through editing the videos. I may not always remember specifically when there's something that comes up like for example, that picture earlier, that happened so fast. I fucking forgot that happened there. So, I just wanted to say especially, I think it's especially harder when you haven't seen a trial before, because then you're not prepared for it. Kind of like a scary movie, right? Like if you already know what's going to happen and you've already, then sometimes it's less bad. So I don't know, just know that we're all kind of in the same boat here, that, we're going to be kind of taking all this in together. So
He tells the defendant, we found your
right.
car.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
think you know.
That's right. That's right.
And the defendant responds in the same interview, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it.
The defendant is unable to say and provide a detailed explanation
Thank you,
of
guys.
the stabs that she made on Alex's body, the different locations, as well as a detailed description of the sequence of events that happened that day.
I mean, and it's like, for example, God, the opening statements in Murdoch, right? Who and the brains? It's that's talk about trick. What? That's so gruesome, right? It's holy fuck. But once you've heard it once, right, it's not as bad. Then it's in Murdoch, we never even trigger warning never even crossed anybody's mind, because it's we'd all watched it. You know what I mean? So I do think that makes a difference when it's something new. I feel like that for me anyway. To where it's because it takes you by surprise.
And then Detective
Right.
Prock asks her, are you sure you carved, or Alex carved boy in your arm? So let's listen to what she says during this time.
One of the questions I have is, after this incident, did you do anything to yourself? Did you harm yourself in any way?
No, I didn't want to.
You said, well, what happened?
I didn't harm myself.
You didn't?
No, when I fell, I hurt my hand and I bit my toe.
Okay. And then the boy carved in your arm. Okay. The part that throws me off on that is, if I'm sitting here,
Guys.
he's going to be carving it in. It's written perfect with a right-hand person like this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if he would have write it in, it would have been reversed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
How did boy get put in your arm? He didn't do that to you, did he? You carved boy into your own arm.
Oh my
Is that
God.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When did that happen?
That happened when I was in the car.
In the car with him? Or why? When did
When I was in the car after I woke up the second time.
Right?
So after you stabbed him and you came back into it, as you put it, because you blacked out, that's when you carved this in?
Right, Kismet? I know. Isn't that crazy?
So within the same interview.
Sorry, that took me by surprise also that she owns up to it right away, which is interesting. Y'all, we're in for a lot of surprises with this one.
The defendant then explains what really happened with the boy on her arm. Detective Prock then asked her, do you think that Alex was trying to sexually assault you that day or have sex with you? And the defendant says, no.
Right?
I just think he wanted...
This trial is going to do that a lot. That's part of why I think it's so... That's why I've wanted to cover this for such a long time. And part of the trouble was I didn't even know if I could because I didn't know, because it wasn't all available on YouTube, like I keep saying, right? I was like, well, fuck, if it's not available, Anyway, yeah, it's full of that, right? It's full of that, which I think is great.
Look at me. Ladies and gentlemen, this was not a knife fight, as the defendant would like you to believe.
Dr. Bob, $1 million question right there, right? Y'all, I yell at my TV. I don't care who it is. Like I was watching, I was like making some food earlier, and like I just on like YouTube, like an autoplay came up, and it was something on Long Crime or whatever. It was like some bit of an interrogation, and it was a situation where it was like somebody who, I don't remember what the situation was. It was like somebody who seemed like they were a clear suspect, whatever the fuck, right? Like they were caught red-handed, as it were. And I was from my kitchen yelling at the TV, lawyer, 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 as I sat there and went into an interview. I'm like, lawyer, like, I don't care who it is. Dr. Bob, I'm with you 100%. Like, literally, I'm like wanting to be like, could I represent you, to anybody. Like, you got you need an attorney, Yeah.
The defendant used this knife.
Oh, boy.
A knife she had taken from her dad's house within days before Alex's death. A sharp EMT knife.
Whoa.
And she took this knife and she brutally and forcefully used the knife to stab Alex in the back of the head. Through the scalp, through the right temporal bone, into the brain, piercing the brain.
Wow.
She used this knife to slit him across the throat 3 times on the right side. She stabbed him 3 times on the left side. And if that wasn't enough, she brutally stabbed him 3 times on the left side of the chest, with one of the blows piercing Alex's lung. She stabbed him in the back right of the shoulder, and she stabbed him in the back, also piercing the lung. And of course, she stabbed him in the genitals, piercing the scrotal sac.
Dude.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was not anger. This was rage, and this was personal.
Another depth you heard overlap, though, right? Bringing the knife in to show the jury the size. Another similarity there.
Even after Alex has been stabbed 16 times, does she use Alex's phone to call for help? No. She has the time and apparent presence of mind to carve B-O-Y into her arm. And why does she carve B-O-Y into her arm? In her very own words, so she wouldn't forget. Because she felt bad, and so she wouldn't forget.
I know.
But moments later, when she walks to Don Sipple's house, she forgets. She forgets everything that happened.
Right?
The physical evidence and the DNA evidence in this case are important as they contradict the defendant's statements. The defendant describes with detail during her interview with Detective Prock that as she was stuck in the mud in that nature location, as she called it, she was looking for something to get some traction under the car. And she realizes that Alex is behind her with the knife. And so then she kind of rolls over onto the back seat of the car, and Alex is cutting her clothes. And she claims that she's able to grab the knife and forcefully take that knife by grabbing the blade, despite having scratches on her left hand, despite the fact that she's right-handed too. And she claims that the majority of the fight happened inside the car.
Another exhibit. Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Love it.
But when you look at the DNA evidence from inside the car, these points are all Alex's DNA. The only DNA that was found in the vehicle that belonged to the defendant was on the rear side of the door, over there.
That's going to be real important here.
You will learn that the results of the defendant's sexual assault exam excluded Alex's DNA
Of course
on
it
the
is.
genital and cervical swabs of the defendant's body.
Yikes.
The
Yikes.
only place Alex's DNA is found on the defendant's body is near those scratches by her underwear line. And so when you examine the DNA evidence, think to yourself, how could Alex's DNA get there? If she used the same knife to carve BOY into her arm,
There you go.
could she also have used that knife to carve herself there?
So here we have, dude, this is where like we're getting a small taste of the Amber Heard times billion, like I was referencing, because here we have a situation where we have somebody who's claiming SA, right? But like, it's like she's claiming that against somebody that allegedly, right, in this case, she's been charged with their murder. Right. Yeah.
Ask yourself, is it
Well, but remember, she's claiming SA, right? That there was a knife fight and whatnot. We're going to hear some of this. We're going to get more of these details when we hear from the
possible for Alex's DNA, his blood
Right.
on that knife, to transfer onto her
Right.
body? You'll also hear that Alex's DNA was under the defendant's fingernails. Of course it was. She brutally stabbed him 16 times. That blood is going to drip down the blade of that knife under her hands and fingernails. You will hear
prosecutor's cute, huh?
a lot of
Her
testimony
outfit,
over the
yeah,
next 3
love it.
weeks. This isn't like what you see on TV. We're not going to be done in an hour. We're going to be here for a number of weeks. And during that time, I want you to pay close attention to the demeanor of witnesses on that witness stand. I want you to examine carefully that testimony with the physical evidence, with the photographs, with the Instagram records, text messages. And then I want you to take the law as the judge describes and apply the facts to that law. And when you do, and when the state has met its burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt
Right.
that the defendant killed Alexander Woodworth, I will ask that you return a verdict of first-degree intentional, a verdict of guilty of first-degree
There you go,
intentional
Dr.
homicide.
First-degree
Thank
intentional
you.
homicide. Okay. First degree intent. Wow, that was a good pause game right there. Look at that. Yes. So it's a 3-week trial. So now we're going to talk about a couple things. Let me pull this back up. All right. So as we go along, y'all, let me know if you have ideas for the counters. Racy's was a no-brainer. I have a couple other ideas, but I think it'll become more clear as we go along. But also, I'm thinking Instagram might be one because Instagram is to this trial like Snapchat is to Murdoch. So there's the courtroom. Okay, take a look at this. Let me pause this real quick. Does anybody know why this is part of the intro video? Has anyone made this connection yet in their minds? We will see, Kitsmits. We will see. Yes, take a look. Why is this book here? What is this book doing here? What do you guys think? Yeah, there's a lot of unique things about this trial, for sure. And by the way, I don't want to spoil anything, but I can't. I don't think it's really spoiling anything, actually. But I will say that one of my favorite cross-examinations of all time is in this trial. Like literally, I actually, the way I kind of got started trying to do this was because you know how we did great opening statements? I was going to do an episode of great cross-examinations, and it was going to be from this trial. And then I started talking about it on a different live stream from, I don't know, a couple of days ago or a week ago or something. And then I was like, hold on, let me just see if I can even find the entire trial. Because that was the whole thing. Because it wasn't available on YouTube, I was like, well, fuck, like I'm never going to get to cover this, right? I had to do some digging and find it and to see if it was all available somewhere. And then I was like, once I found it, I was like, all right, now I'm going to cover it. Right, Into the Wild. Do you remember the name of the guy? Because it's a true story, right? Do you remember the name of the guy who goes into the wild? Actually, I think it's actually on the title, isn't it? Or on the cover. It's on the cover. You can see the name on the cover. There might be some relevance there. Yep. Okay. Also, now is a good time for me to pull something else up too. Right. So what about that last name though? Okay. As we do that, as we think about this, let me pull this up. This is you guys are, this is a puzzler, right? You know, things are going to get revealed as we go along. Let me pull this up. Hold on. Let me share this. Okay, here's the updated. This is the reveal thumbnail. Okay. Oops. So remember when I said, oh, we'll be revealed. Okay, there she is. Look at her. So there she was before, right? Hipster Central. Yep. It's Ezra's last name. And remember, we heard something about Monica. We're going to learn more about that, what's going on with the name thing later. But yeah, there she is. And there's the journal. By the way, the little special thing I was saying, so that there's the Racy's right there on the wall, replacing the clock. And these are Alex's actual journals and writings because he was into philosophy and stuff. Which, by the way, we get to learn some of his writings in this trial, and they're brilliant. Really, I love philosophy, and I took philosophy in college, and I almost double majored in philosophy, and they're really good. They're really good. It's really a shame. He had some really novel ideas, actually. So that we'll get to see. So okay, so yeah, so I wanted to just show you guys that. So there she is. And let me pull back up now this. So, yeah, so you guys liked the prosecutor, right? I want to get into the defense because it's going to be quite a different change of pace. And I think that's on purpose. I'm really curious what you guys are going to think about this. It's really fascinating, okay? So, by the way, this is Don Simple's house.
It's a house.
Oh, you didn't like the philosophy courses? Interesting. So yeah, so that's the redwood forest. That's going to come up later. You guys will learn why that's relevant. And Squangwin gets around. So cute. I just love that Squangwin. Shout out to Corbin Lineberry here. Okay, so it's going to be a big change of pace. Not in a bad way or anything, right? But let's pull up. Let's get into the defense's opening statements. You guys ready?
It's 10 after 4. Ezra is hysterical. She's running. She's falling. She's running. She sees a house, a farm, a door. She follows the driveway. She gets to the back. She walks up the steps, comes to the door, and rings the bell over and over and over again.
I'm going to back. I'm not going to give my opinion yet. I'm just going to rewind that and play that again because I think it is worth it. All right.
I will ask that you return a verdict of first-degree intentional, a verdict of guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. Thank you.
It's 10 after 4. Ezra is hysterical. She's running. She's falling. She's running. She sees a house, a farm, a door. She follows the driveway. She gets to the back. She walks up the steps, comes to the door, and rings the bell over and over and over again. A farmer from our community sees her. She's disheveled. She has blood on her face, bloody lip, a cut on her lip, a red mark on her neck. She's wearing a flannel shirt, sweater underneath, cut open, shirt cut up, pants cut up. There's blood on her legs. There's a little blood on her front. Her pants are covered in mud. She has no shoes. The farmer opens the door. She says, "Take me to the hospital."
Right.
He brings her in, finds her a seat. She
Yeah.
says, "I was attacked." She's in shock. She's confused. She's disorientated. He sees she's in distress. She's upset. He asks, "Who attacked you?" She doesn't know who attacked her. She doesn't know what happened. She doesn't know where it happened. She doesn't know much. She doesn't even know her name.
She doesn't even know her name. Let me back that up. I think this is, again, I'm going to try to reserve my opinion. Let me back it up a second.
She's disorientated. He sees she's in distress. She's upset. He asks, "Who attacked you?" She doesn't know who attacked her. She doesn't know what happened. She doesn't know where it happened. She doesn't know much. She doesn't even know her name. I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know.
I know,
Our
right?
farmer calls for help.
I know.
Let me take you back in time a little bit.
I don't know where Thunder is. Hold on. Let me just do this real quick. Hold on. Let me make sure that this is going to pick it up. Hold on. Calling all squirrels. Calling all squirrels. Okay, hopefully they heard the squirrel call. Yeah, I was initially I was going to answer that question, but I'm not going to spoil it. We're going to learn together. We're going to learn together. We're going to have to be patient. These are great questions, Kitsmans. Don't forget your questions. These are great questions. They will all be answered in due course. Do not worry. We will learn. And I'll be honest, it might be when she takes the stand. If she takes the stand, sorry. Oh, it's just short. I feel like she's usually here by now, though. Right? Great. Right, yeah. Somebody go wake up Fender. I know. So Right. No, great. It's great. It's great. Yeah. And y'all feel free to, if you, I'm taking notes. Anybody that wants to take notes, I encourage it. Like, I think that, again, because this is, we're scrolling this first time, right? Like, again, it's not been done before. And I guess Maisha was saying it was featured on some TV show, but again, to my knowledge, apart from when the trial happened live, it was on cable TV, on court TV. Apart from that, I don't think anybody had the opportunity to see this entire trial. So, so again, we are breaking new ground covering this and analyzing it and looking at all the details and everything, right? So yeah, let me back this up though for a second. There was something important here I wanted to play again.
Our farmer calls for help. Let me take you back in time a little bit. A couple of hours before. 10 minutes to 1. Ezra is at her ex-boyfriend's house. She's going there for a conversation. Conversation to confront him about their past relationship and how he treated her. A conversation for closure about how they've broken up. A conversation to perhaps continue their initial friendship, but without the sex. No rough sex. And they're talking in his house, and they're interrupted by a man named Jason Mengel, 35-year-old man who was outside looking in, checking up on this young woman that used to live with him. And the police arrive. Ezra and Alex come out and they talk to the police. Ezra, in her easygoing, cooperative manner, speaks with them. Eau Claire Police Department Officer Christopher O'Neill talks with both Ezra and her ex-boyfriend. And he says, everything's okay. Everything's good. $12.50. Everything's good. 4:10. She's suffering from what our experts say is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Sound familiar?
How does she get from here to here? What happened?
I love that you're doing
That's
that.
what this case is about. What happened?
Y'all, I'm gonna rewind that. I think to me, it's like that's fucking brilliant, man. The way he took the marker and drew that, like you can even hear, like that is so. I think that's powerful.
That's what this case is about. What happened? Ezra and her ex-boyfriend are out in the middle of nowhere. Her car is stuck in the mud.
Looking at where that exhibit is positioned, we can tell where the jury is seated, right? Because that's going to be facing the jury. So if we go back to, let me pull this up real quick. If we go back to, where is the courtroom? Cute squirrel. Hold on. Aha, here. Right. So this will actually help us be oriented. So if you look at the left-hand side, there's the jury box. Take a look at these chairs, guys. Have y'all ever look at the chairs that the jury gets to sit in? They look like fucking swivel chairs, man. Because they match. If you look at the chairs that are there at like council table, and you see how they are identical. Look at this nice courtroom, guys. The jury gets comfortable like swivel chairs, man. And same with the witness, because there's the witness box. I'm in the middle. They get those comfortable, like that's a nice fucking chair. They did not skimp on the chairs. Think about, compare it to the in Murdoch, right, dude? So yeah. So Kidsman is saying, so defense saying that she has PTSD. I sent some psych experts in our future. Yep. And he's saying that given she has PTSD, how does she develop it? Obviously traumatic event. Right. I know. And that's why I'm with you that I wish Fender were here for sure. Which means it couldn't have been first degree murder, because that means it was premeditated. And why would she have trauma if she planned to do it? If you're following his argument, correct. Right. Really, it's honestly, in a way, it's kind of a battered spouse thing, right? Which is really interesting, because I didn't even make that connection when I was thinking about the different overlaps with Deputy Heard. I didn't even think about the fact that really it's kind of a battered spouse thing, which has an overlap with other trials like the Ashley Bedingfield one, and like I think it's what Sarah Boone's going to try to do as she represents herself. Good luck there. But like, there's other trials, that have been featured recently. Anyway, but yeah, it's it's kind of like a self-defense, like it's what they call, it's an affirmative defense, right? In other words, her defense team is planning an affirmative defense, right? Where they're going to put on experts, they're going to put on a case in chief, and they're going to give an affirmative defense, like what we see in, again, just to use it as an example, because it just happened in the Ashley Bedingfield case, right? Where they're saying like, this is not first degree murder. They're not saying it was somebody else, right? They're saying, yeah, that was me, but it's not how the state is saying it went. Basically, yep. So that's right. Yep, that's what they're going to go with. Yep. So, okay, so let's go back to here. Cool.
While it's the middle of nowhere, it's a place familiar to many.
Oh.
She's on her back.
Yeah. Trigger warning, first of all. And I'm going to back this up again, because this is actually really good storytelling, in my opinion.
Her car is stuck in the mud. While it's the middle of nowhere, it's a place familiar to many. She's on her back, in the back seat of a car. Her ex-boyfriend holding her down with his weight. You came back. You still love me. He takes off her glasses, puts them in the back window well. He touches her. Ezra is beautiful. Ezra is handsome. Ezra is my shining star. They're in this backseat with him on top. Her head is to the passenger side. Her feet are near the open door. There's one open door. It's on the driver's side. As he's on top of her, he takes a scarf and he covers her eyes. Now, he's done this before. When they've had sex in his apartment in the past, she's agreed. He's done that before. But even when she agreed, it was unnerving. In the darkness that he created, he pushes forward, forces himself on her, and he kisses her. She turns and says no. He keeps touching her. You abandoned me. You owe me this. He's touching her. She's tense. Her body is not moving.
Now,
she regresses in her mind.
Now, if you're wondering to yourself, and I'm going to back up because I don't want to talk for it. If you're wondering to yourself, how the fuck is he saying these things, right? Because it's like, he's speaking to specific details about their conversations and shit when this happened. I have to say when it was opening statements of the Ashley Bedingfield trial, which I haven't watched that entire trial. I've just seen bits and pieces, but I watched the opening statements. Okay. And when it was the defense opening statements for that trial, which was, again, that was a battered, there's the, affirmative defense there, battered spouse. In the defense's opening statements, I thought to myself, how the fuck is the defense not getting objected to? Just like I thought here, right? Because they're giving these, it's like facts, not evidence, right? And in my mind, during the Ashley Bedingfield trial, I thought the same thing as I did in this trial, which is the only way they can make these claims is if the defendant is going to take the stand, and the attorneys already know that the defendant is going to take the stand, right? Because you know how they do the colloquy, right? And it's like they can kind of decide last minute. In some of these cases, if it's an affirmative defense, especially in a situation where it's a battered spouse, really you have to hear from the battered spouse, right? I mean, that's kind of a big part of the defense strategy. So I think that in these cases, they've worked it out. Like they already know they're going to take the stand, right? And so their defense attorneys in the opening statements are saying things that they are the way they're able to do it, right? Because they can't just say stuff. The way they're able to do it is because these are things they know that the defendant is going to testify to when they take the stand. And then once the defendant testifies to it, it's evidence, right? Now, of course, there's the credibility issue, but it's evidence because testimony is evidence, right? So, so Kismis is saying, how did she wind up in his back seat? Did you miss that connection? No, he has not. They have not said that yet. We will learn more about that later.
You abandoned me. You owe me this. He's touching her. She's tense. Her body is not moving. She regresses in her mind to the times in the past and thinks, let's just get this over with.
And also, to answer that question is going to depend on who's answering it as well. I will say there's, it's in other words, the answers to the question of how did she get in the back seat too. That's like going to be probably one of the ultimate issues for the jury in terms of, well, not an ultimate issue, but in terms of the facts for the jury, right?
Then he starts cutting. He has a knife. Takes her sweater. And he starts short.
So notice
slow.
The defense is not showing pictures of the victim's clothes. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. Of Alex's clothes, the deceased. He's showing evidence of who he believes the victim is, right? This is Ezra's sweater. This is not Alex's sweater. This is Ezra's sweater. Isn't that crazy to think about? Like, think about that. It's like flipping everything on its head normally, right? In a murder trial, usually you're going to see the first real crime scene pictures that we're seeing are portraying her as a victim. I think that's really powerful.
Methodical strokes, and he cuts her sweater. I want one last time. I deserve one last time. She's afraid. Frozen in her fear, she lays still. He keeps cutting. As he cuts through her sweater, he cuts through her next shirt, and he cuts through her t-shirt, and he nicks her on the stomach.
I don't see a cut.
She's
Do I
afraid.
see a cut?
Frozen in fear, she lays still. He's never cut her before. He's cut her clothes, but he's never cut her before.
Yeah.
He moves down.
Y'all, does it remind you guys of you know who? Let's go back to this picture. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. I see creases of like skin, but I don't really. Oh wait, hold on. God, I can barely see that. That looks like you could have done that with your fingernail. Okay, yeah. No, does not even. Yeah, that's. Wow. Right? No, they were, because she goes to the hospital and gets assessed for SA, right? Yeah. honestly, I've hurt myself worse on God. The list would be very long if I tried to even say of the ways I've hurt myself worse. As y'all know, I'm super accident prone.
Frozen in fear, she lays still. He's never cut her before. He's cut her clothes, but he's never cut her before. He moves down. He's cutting her pants. Cuts the inside of her left leg. Cuts the inside of her right leg open. He cuts open her leggings. He's on top of her. He has a knife. He's cutting. She's terrified. Frozen in fear, she lays still. Her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, Alex, she knows him. She knows that he is a nihilist. And you'll hear about that. He believes life has no meaning.
Yeah.
There are no consequences for one's
That's
moral
correct.
actions.
Dr. Smith.
She has been back in his apartment before. She's heard his ramblings on about Kierkegaard and Fear and Trembling.
Which picture, Dr. Bob?
One of his favorite things to tell her about was the story of Abraham and Isaac. The story in which Abraham was gifted a son, Isaac. And Abraham loved Isaac more than anything, anyone in the world. But there came a day when Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son.
So that's a book. So the problem is that's an evidence. That's an evidence. It's a picture of an actual book. Remember, Alex was really into reading that book, and it's actually in the opening slide presentation that I have or whatever. It's actually in his actual copy of that book is in evidence for a reason. So that's why it's not like it's just a picture. It's evidence, right? It was, and as y'all know, the state's in charge. They're the ones that provide the evidence, right? It's the state's exhibit. It's in evidence. So so it's not objectionable. I can understand if it was just like a random picture, but it's actually Alex's book. So
Took him on in secret. Didn't tell anybody else. And Abraham takes his son Isaac out to go and kill him. God intervened and saved Isaac. Ezra did not want to be his sacrifice. She's heard his ramblings before, where he's read to her from his journals, read to her while they were having sex. I've half-heartedly tried to isolate myself from you, afraid I would taint you, yet I love you. I am sorry for this failure on my part. I know my touch would kill you, yet I reach out. That is my sin, the violence of my flesh that I lack a soul to correct.
now, guys, let's bear in mind as we hear some of these readings, this is a philosophy major. Alex was a philosophy major. And there's a lot of, I'm sure that some of you guys will know what I mean. This is a very common type of like mechanism used in writing, especially when it comes to philosophy of like, things that sound like they're like metaphors, right? So you just have to, I don't know what edgelord means, Kid Smiths, but yeah, but just keep that in mind. That's the context, and we're going to get different context depending on who we hear from, right?
She knows of his writings about consent. His writings, merely doing as one will sexually makes consent irrelevant. She would hear him repeat over and over and over again his personal mantra: love, and do as you will.
Now that mantra right there is going to be a big part of this entire fucking case, because the whole part of the question, one of the questions for the jury on is really going to be, how do they understand? What do they think he meant by that? Because again, it's going to come into it's going to be a fact for the jury. We're going to hear, but that was his mantra: love and do as you will, and that's going to be brought up in the different writings. And I have my own personal opinions about what it means, but we're not going to go into that yet. But I just wanted to point that out, that is going to be a big part, because the defense is going to end up kind of using that as in that was him justifying like essaying and stuff like that. Just, I think that's kind of given, but yeah. Oh, gotcha, Kitsvitz. Yes. Yep. I would say that is accurate. Yeah. And remember, these are hipsters, right? They're hipsters. They're hipsters. This was hipster central happening. Okay.
She's read his writings about ritual, the mutilation of bodies, self-mutilation, severance of our flesh. Faith demands that we take a razor to our own most.
Remember, look at that. No, all you have to do, look at that. Remember, look at that thumbnail, the updated thumbnail, and you can see it's hipster central. And they live in a coffee shop, basically. They basically live in the coffee shop.
She's read of his fascination
But y'all, we don't get many trials where it's hipsters charged with murder, right?
with violence. The secret is not avoiding the violence, but living.
Very different.
But in living with it. She knows of his captivation with cannibalism. All are contaminated with violence and vulnerability.
So they're going to try to make you think it's literal.
He writes about eating and being eaten. Now on March 22nd, in that back seat of the car, he's on top of her. He has the knife. He's cutting her shirt or her pants. He's cutting her leggings. He cuts her leg. She's terrified.
I mean, come on now. Like, you guys, y'all, it's so reminiscent of Amber Heard, right? Like, remember when we looked at the pictures of her face and we're like, wait, what are we looking at here? Black Widow was fucking hilarious because she was like, did she get punched in the face by a tiny ant? It was just so
He
good.
moves towards her vagina. And he cuts right next to her vagina. She is terrified. She knows she can no longer remain still. She must act. She reaches with her right arm underneath the seat to get some leverage. And she twists her body so that
I took that as metaphorical about that. We're going to get more into his writings as it goes on, but I take a lot of that as metaphorical.
She's on her left hip, pulling up her right hip. She pulls her right leg up to protect her vagina.
I have scratches worse.
And as she does so, he jabs the knife into her thigh, in her upper thigh. He then starts cutting her pants. On her thigh, there were number 3s. He cuts through her leggings on her thigh. He starts cutting up and down along her leg.
That's at least something.
She's frozen, afraid, knows she must act. Then he jabs her with the knife a second time.
I hadn't noticed this before. I'm just noticing this for the first time. One thing that I haven't heard him mention, let's keep an eye out for this, guys. Let's keep an eye out for this in the testimony from the defense. One thing I haven't heard anybody mention, I don't know that anybody does, I'm just noticing this, is her being cold. Which is interesting because this is, what month did they say it was? Well, it's winter in Wisconsin, right? There's snow everywhere. We saw the pictures, right? They're outside in the snow, right? Well, I guess they're in the backseat of the car, but like eventually they're outside of the car. Either way, right? They're like, if you're getting your clothes tore up and whatnot, anyway, one of the things that you would feel is cold, I would imagine. And I don't know that anybody describes that part of it. Just interesting. Her doing what? I don't know if you're referring to something I said or something in the testimony or the opening statement. So yeah, I'll back it up a second here. Remember, it'll get easier to hear, guys, after the opening statements. It's because the attorneys are wandering around and they don't have mics.
Rush. She's fighting. She's wrestling. She's
That's
fighting.
true.
She's kneeing. She's kicking. She's using her hands. She knocks the knife, cuts her hand. She gets the knife. And she needs to get out. He is on top of her. He is in the car. There is one way out. It's through that door. She tries to scoot around through the well of the seat. Her bottom's through there. He's still between her. He's stopping her. He's preventing her. He doesn't let her get out.
I mean, at the very least, we do know. She's so far from what we know. So far, we heard her in that interview say that she carved the word boy into her arm. We heard her say that. Right? So we know she at least did that much, right? So to Dr. Bob's point, that's very valid, right?
Moves towards the back of the seat where eventually, if this is the back of the front seat, her back is up against the seat. Alex is right here. The open door is here. He's not letting her out. She can't get out. He's holding her. He's attacking her. It happens in a rush and she stabs him.
Wait, Kitsmith, you're saying that not everybody in your public place wants to listen to this trial with us? Like, what are they, crazy?
He reaches out and he grabs her throat. He pushes her head up against the headrest. She can't breathe. She can't breathe. She's struggling for her life. He holds her neck, he squeezes her neck, and he looks her in the eyes. And she just stabs anywhere and everywhere that she can. She is terrified. And he doesn't stop. He reaches his hand up and he pulls at her hair.
You got it. And also, I'm still just thinking to myself, gosh, I wish Fender were here. Fender's going to be like, so, like, wish I'd been there. Let me back it up. Yes. Here we go. Would you like me to play it or just keep it paused here? I'll just keep it paused here. Yeah. No, of course. Right. I mean, I assumed, right. Of course. Yeah. I mean, obviously, for sure. 100%. That's why I was joking ish. Right. Because like they should want to watch it with us. Right. But at the same time, yeah. So, actually, I'm going to back it up a second so we can hear what he says is supposedly happened with this wound, as it were.
On her thigh. He starts cutting up and down along her leg. She's frozen, afraid.
He starts cutting up and down her leg. That's not what that looks like from the description. We do see pictures, Kitsmiths, of her face in this opening statement, and we'll talk about her neck when we get there. But yeah, we'll see pictures. I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Bob?
Knows she must act. Then he jabs her with the knife a second time.
Again.
And then it all happens.
Again, all the pictures we're seeing are of the defendant, right? The victim, quote unquote, right? The defendant. I mean, it's really smart if you're planning an affirmative defense strategy like they are,
Rush. She's fighting.
Right?
She's wrestling. She's fighting. She's kneeing. She's kicking. She's using her hands. She knocks the knife, cuts her hand. She gets the knife. And she needs to get out. He is on top of her. He is in the car. There is one way out. It's through that door. She tries to scoot around through the well of the seat. Her bottom's through there. He's still between her. He's stopping her. He's preventing her. He doesn't let her get out. She moves towards the back of the seat where eventually, if this is the front back of
I mean, okay. I don't ever judge if the only time I ever pay attention to like a defendant or whatever, like in terms of like what I think about them is if they're taking the stand and they're testifying, because then that's when you're supposed to, if you're the jury, right? That's when you're judging their credibility, just like with anyone is, right? However, as a female, okay, who has been through, traumatic events and has, I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I know I'm not the only one in the Squirrel Crew who's in that situation, right? Like, I still have nightmares, right? And flashbacks, okay? And like, the thing is that this defense attorney is telling her story, quote unquote, the way he's telling her story from what she told to him, okay? And he's doing, in my opinion, a really, really, really good job of it. And the details, like he's putting you right there. What's crazy to me, and I wish that Fender were here. Like, what's crazy to me is her sitting here, and she's not being re-triggered. She's not being triggered by the telling of the story. Like, I don't understand that, because this is like she's not even phased at all. You know what I mean? It's kind of dude. The opening of his opening statements. You see it. You can, dude, it puts you right there. I get goosebumps. It doesn't even matter if it's factually accurate. It's so compelling. He puts you right there. And then he puts you in the seat of the car. And then he puts you at Dawn Simple's house on the porch ringing the doorbell. He puts you right there. Oh yeah, I did see her wipe her eye once. Good point, Gibsons. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, and he's I mean, yeah, I'm having a hard time picturing it in terms of the logistics, right? Right, logistically. But if you're someone who this happened to you and you lived this, then you would understand how it worked logistically. And the telling of the story and hearing someone talk about it in some ways could even be worse than trying to talk about it yourself. So yeah.
The front seat, her back is up against the seat. Alex is right here. The open door is here. He's not letting her out. She can't get out. He's holding her. He's attacking her.
This is all, notice how it's all in the present tense, right? These are all things that would put you, like, this is triggering as fuck if this happened to you, right? Like it's all present tense. It's putting you there. Like, again, the point of the way he's telling it is to try to put the jury right there in the moment. So if you're the person this happened to and you're listening, you're being put there in the moment. Oh, what could be possibly the most triggering possible thing that could ever happen? That, right? It's worse than past tense. It's worse than third person. It's worse than hypotheticals. It's like putting you there in the present. Like you are there now. Like, anyway, yeah.
It happens in a rush and she stabs him. He reaches out and he grabs her throat. He pushes her head up against the headrest. She can't breathe. She can't breathe. She's struggling for her life. He holds her neck, he squeezes her neck, and he looks her in the eyes. And she just stabs anywhere and everywhere that she can. She is terrified. And he doesn't stop. He reaches his hand up and he pulls at her hair and he whips her hair out and she screams, "Let go!"
Another ripping of the hair, like
And he keeps doing it. He won't stop. She stabs him more. He doesn't stop. She stabs him. She wants out. He won't let her out. She stabs him in the head. He stops.
Yeah.
He gets out of the car.
And I see what you're saying, Kithis, but the thing is remember the point of PTSD, right? Is like, point of PTSD, not the point, but what happens with PTSD, right, is you get triggered. Like something that is from that time, a smell, a sight, a sound, whatever, let alone here's your entire story, detail by detail, blah, blah, right? Like, so, and he's already said that she has PTSD. Now it'd be different if they weren't claiming she has PTSD, they weren't claiming that she was traumatized, that would be different, but they're claiming she has PTSD. So that's why it's weird. But yeah, the hair is very unique.
That's the red
There
mark.
you go. Tips.
Hours later at the hospital, to her neck. That's her hair in the well of the car, in the driver's side rear passenger seat, where he left it after he pulled it out. He's now out of the car. He's on his feet. He's walking. He's up and about. Look at his pants. We'll talk more about that later. He's up. He's walking about.
So
He's
there's
in
the
this
victim.
area here. You can see his blood in different patches on the ground. He's staggering around. She's sitting at the edge of the seat, overwhelmed, afraid, confused, doesn't know what to do. He's still up. She's cautious. She watches him. She hears him. He says, "I need help." She's afraid, but she wants to help. She stands.
This part's crazy.
She steps and approaches him. He approaches her. And then all of a sudden it's happening again. He grabs her
is
again. He
fun.
pulls her in. He's pulling her down. He is in. He's pulled
Right.
her in. She has the knife. She reaches
Yeah.
around,
Yeah.
stabs him one last time. He lets go. She backs up. He stands there. He takes off his coat, throws it on the ground, and lays on the ground. She backs up back to the seat where she sits in total shock, overwhelmed, hyperventilating, panicked. It goes dark. She's in the present. It goes dark. It's present. She's worried she's going to pass out. Her mind is racing. Her body is not responding. It feels numb.
Yes.
She has the knife. Mindlessly and without thought, she cuts her left arm, the clothes on her left arm.
That's why I was saying this part's crazy. It doesn't make a lot of sense. We may not know what the theory is until we hear from other people later on. But yeah, it's weird.
And uses the knife to scratch the word boy into her arm. Then she's up. She's running. She doesn't know where she's at. She goes back the same way they came. She runs up the hill. She falls. She
Right.
runs.
Yes,
she
I-
falls. She walks. She staggers.
I actually already commented on that. You might have missed it, but similarly to the Ashley Benefield trial, yeah, absolutely. Like these are, again, the similarity between those two. These are affirmative defenses, like battered spouse type of defense, right? Even though they weren't married in this case, but where yes, like in both of those cases, the defense attorneys and the defendants already know that the defendant is going to be taking the stand because there's no other way they can put on their defense at all because they're doing an affirmative defense. So yeah, it's very evident to me, just like it was with Ashley Benefield from the opening statement that yeah, the defendant is going to have to take the stand because otherwise it's like, yeah, exactly what you're saying. How is this all going to come in? It can only come in through her. And obviously there's no one's objecting because it's already understood, right? Like, of course, they're still going to do the colloquy, but like it's understood that they're going to take the stand to get all the evidence in correct. So
She can see the road. She gets to the road.
oh yeah,
She walks. She runs. She falls. She falls. She drops the knife. She drops the phone. She sees the driveway, follows the driveway. She gets to the door.
and Andrea, I know you've seen her on the stand and maybe some other things from the trial because again, thankfully no one's seen the whole thing because I know it's not possible. But let's try not to give any spoilers because most people, if not everyone here, has not seen any of this trial. So I'm myself as well, right? I'm not giving any spoilers. I'm you know, I'm keeping that in mind that we're going to go through it together, right?
She talks to our farmer. And she tells
No
him
idea.
I was attacked. Our farmer saw she was in distress.
Deals with our farmer.
Saw she was upset. He gave her
Our farmer, who art in heaven, Tom, what is his name? Tom's was Don. Sorry, our farmer who art in heaven, Don Simple be thy name. I think that's his name anyway.
help. What happened here? Her disturbed and obsessive ex-boyfriend attacked her, cut her, strangled her. She fought to survive. You'll see over the course of this trial the evidence. The evidence that there was a struggle in the back seat of that car. A struggle between two people. That's not going to be the main issue that you're going to need to decide, I submit to you. The question that you're going to have in your mind is not whether she believed it, but whether her beliefs
No, I
were
agree.
reasonable.
Dude, I think he's awesome. I think he's doing a great job. And I'll talk more about why I think he's doing a great job when we get to the end of his closing arguments. But yeah, 100%. I mean, what else is he going to do though, right? You know, that's the thing. It's like he's doing the right thing by taking here's the facts, right? Here's the things we can't get around these facts, right? But where can we fill in the gaps with the power of suggestion, you know?
In order to do that, for you to determine that, you need to know more about Ezra and Alex.
I love that we're getting to watch
So
the
let me
trial
give you
together
a
for the
brief,
first time.
quick,
That we have.
maybe not as brief as we like, overview. Ezra was born in Stanley, Wisconsin. Her mother, Rose,
Okay,
was a
so now I just got this once again. Now we're going back to the beginning. Did you guys catch that? Ezra was born in Stanley, Wisconsin. Now we're going back to the beginning. So think about it, guys. All of that was like the introduction. Think about remember, how did he start his opening statement? It's 4:10 a.m. or it's 4:10. I think, I don't remember if it says a.m. or p.m. It's 4:10. You know, it's cold. Ezra's going and she's ringing the doorbell, right? I mean, that's how the whole thing started. Now we're going back to here's where Ezra was born, right? And we're going to hear all these other details. But I think that was really smart, in my opinion.
Ezra and Alex.
Oh, yeah.
Let me give you a brief, quick, maybe not as brief as we like,
Absolutely.
overview. Ezra was born in Stanley, Wisconsin. Her mother, Rose, was a teenager, 15 years old.
14 years old. So that means
Ezra's
she had
father is not a part of their life. Rose raised her there on her own while trying to juggle parenting as a teenager in high school. She eventually finds, let me back up for a second, when Ezra is born,
I think that's Ezra's mom. I don't know that for sure.
Rose has her daughter. She names her daughter Monica.
What it looks like.
And her and Monica are the two in the world.
Did you hear that?
Eventually,
Kid?
Rose.
Did you hear that, Kid? Did you hear that? Yeah, I think I don't know for sure. I think that's Ezra's mom. I'm not going to Google it. I don't want to get again. We're watching this together for the first time. I don't know everything because again, as I've said a million times, this whole thing was not on YouTube. But I think that's Ezra's mom. But also, did you hear that, Kit Smith's about the Monica?
Rose and Monica. Rose finds Joe Shane Carlin. And Joe Shane adopts
Yep.
Monica.
Yep.
And she becomes Monica Carlin. And she grows up in that house with Rose and with Joe Shane. I'm not getting too much into the details now, but what she'll tell you, what she's told others, is living with those two in that household.
I don't know if DSN is reading the chat, but DSN, if you're listening, Dr. Bob asked a question in the chat to you.
Like 2 tornadoes in the house. That relationship is tumultuous. When she's 12, they divorce. Ezra is in high school. She doesn't feel comfortable in her body. It doesn't feel like it fits with who she is. She starts exploring other names, using other pronouns. She tries out Timothy. Doesn't really work. She uses neutral pronouns. At some point, she changes her name legally to Ezra McCandless. She finishes high school. She goes away to college for a year, and then she comes back. It's the summer of 2017. She's in Eau Claire. She happens upon this coffee shop, Racy's, where she meets. One of the first people she meets is Jason Mengel. Ezra is 19, and Jason,
She's
a
19.
34-year-old medic within the, I believe it's the National Guard, starts dating her. They start having sex. She moves in.
100%.
During this time, she's going to Racy's quite often, and she meets other people at Racy's.
It's
one of
good.
which
It's
is
good
Alex
for the brain.
Woodworth.
Yeah, I'm going to back it up just a second. This is important. But yeah, Racy's is a huge part of the story, first of all. Second of all, I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Bob. It is good for the brain, right? Like what he was responding to DSN. Try hard to believe so far, trying to keep an open mind, however. That's the name of the game right there, right, guys? Imagine if humans were better at that as a species, right? Like keeping an open mind, relying on facts, not jumping to conclusions, not rushing to judgment. It's so important, and it keeps our brains, what's the right word, guys? It keeps them flexible. It keeps them, what's the right way to put it? Like, it keeps them in a position to where they're always able to like learn, right? Like that's the thing. Like, you know, I guess, yeah, flexible is a word. What's another word that I'm looking for? Anyway, yeah, malleable, right? Yeah, in a good way, right? Like we can always, you know, learn something new every day, and we can always, you know, there's a saying that I love, right? And it's something like, you know, I don't know if it's a saying. It's something I say, okay? And it's like, you know, I think one of the best things in life is like if you never lose the ability to surprise yourself. And a lot of times that means finding out you were wrong about something. It's like a beautiful thing, right? To be surprised that you thought you knew something and you didn't. I don't know. I don't know if you guys know what I mean, but I love that. I love that experience of like, wow, like, you know, and it doesn't have to be something bad. I can give you guys an example for me. Making these freaking thumbnails. It really dawned on me the other day, making the thumbnails for this one, that I'm like, I just totally surprised myself because, as y'all know, I can't draw to save my life. So I've always thought I had literally no visual art skills. I mean, I still don't. I'm not saying I have that, right? It's just like, you know, between my having no technology skills and no visual art skills, right? I always kind of thought that making the thumbnails would be like a chore. I love making the thumbnails. I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying I love making them. And that's the thing that's surprising because it's very zen to me. And this dawned on me the other day. I was driving and I was like, it dawned on me that I love making the thumbnails. It's one of the only times where I'm not like I'm really always multitasking and doing a million things and like, you know, go and whatever. But I found that making the thumbnails, I just totally can get really zen and I can just like chill out and like do just that. It's really weird. It's kind of like what running would do for me. So anyway, that's just an example. Like that surprised me because I never would have expected that to be the case for me. That's like, in other words, I learned something new about my brain, really. Like I did not know my brain would react to making thumbnails. And it's something about the fact that I'm arranging things visually, but I don't have to draw. Because if I had to draw it, it'd be, you guys have seen the, yeah. So yeah, fungible, adaptable, right? Adaptable, right? Yep, that's another good word. Yep, open for sure. Yeah. So I'm glad you guys can resonate with that. But let me back it up just a second here because this is an important part of the story here.
They start having sex.
That's it. Neuroplastic. Thank
She
you.
moves in.
Yes.
During this time, she's going to Racy's quite often. And she meets other people at Racy's, one of which is Alex Woodworth. And over the summer and the early fall, her and Alex develop a relationship, a friendship, based upon these non-traditional ideas. He's accepting of Ezra's fluidity along the gender spectrum. He also has some odd ideas. He tells her right away about his journals, his fascination with violence, his captivation with cannibalism. And she finds this kind of a yang to her yang, right? She thinks of herself as a positive, glowing, and here's this interesting man who has these negative philosophies.
I don't think that's
They get along, and they talk. But at this time, she's still dating Jason, having sex with Jason. There comes to be a time in the fall where she's throwing up every day.
Oh,
All the
y'all,
time.
raise your scroll paw if you were expecting that. Wait, well, we haven't, the ball hasn't really dropped fully yet, but did you guys hear what he just said? Was anyone expecting that? I'm going to back that up. Right, were you guys ready for another twist and turn in this plot? This is where it just gets, everything gets so much crazier, you guys.
With Jason. There comes to be a time in the fall where she's throwing up
Keep growing up.
every day,
Whose baby is it?
all the time.
You know whose baby it is?
She starts to figure out, maybe I'm pregnant.
Ah,
She takes a test,
oh,
and sure enough, she's pregnant.
there you go, guys.
She's 19.
Bingo.
Her mom told her one thing is, don't
Right.
get pregnant when you're a teenager.
Wow.
Can't have a kid when you're young.
Kyle has it all.
She doesn't talk to her mother. She doesn't talk to her adopted father.
Crazy.
She goes through this in her own mind, sometimes with Jason, who may or may not be supporting her in the way that she wants. And eventually she decides she needs to terminate that pregnancy.
There you go.
She drives to Minneapolis on her birthday. She turned 20. The day she decided to have an abortion.
Y'all.
And after that, she gets home and she's recovering, as you would imagine anyone is, for such a procedure. Jason, not there anymore. He's not there to support her. He's sleeping on the couch. Their relationship in public may seem as if they're girlfriend-boyfriend, but he doesn't want any part of her anymore. In fact, at some point, he physically leaves. He leaves her alone after this to go off on his own spiritual quest for 3 weeks out west, while his 20-year-old girlfriend, recovering from an abortion with his children, is home alone, trying to sort that out. During this time, she seeks solace from others. And her and Alex get along really well. They talk. He's accepting.
Yeah. Andrea, you know, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I will say when we get to her testimony, and also testimony from other people, I'm not going to say who, I have thoughts about this abortion. But I'm not going to give any of that away right now. But as we learn more about Ezra and her personality, I have thoughts about this. So I totally get what you're saying, Andrea. But yeah, again, I'm not gonna try to, I'm gonna not give anything away, even though I get excited. But yeah, we will talk more about it. But I have thoughts about this whole thing, birthday abortion.
of her regretful decision. He's accepting of her. He listens. The relationship is intense. And at some point in November, it turns sexual. She's living with Jason. She's having sex with Alex. Her and Jason are no longer in the same bed. They are not intimate. Her relationship with Alex continues to grow in intensity. They don't see each other all the time, but they're at Racy's, exchanging journals. You'll see her doodles in his journals, where she learns about some of his philosophies. And in the beginning, sex is rather vanilla. He likes to have sex with her when she's in the prone position.
Do you guys remember when we had that conversation about what flavor ice cream would sex be?
Because she comes to learn that he likes that look upon her in the back in which she looks more masculine. The sex grows in intensity, becomes painful, becomes rough. Sometimes she just goes along. Sometimes she says, "No, that hurts, stop." And he doesn't listen.
Yeah, I
She
think
just
that's her
goes
mom,
along.
guys. She's beautiful.
Come January, juggling these two, Jason and Alex.
Andrea, love it.
Alex wants more of a commitment from her. Alex says, "I want you to be mine, only mine." She's like, "No, this is getting too intense. I can't do that. I'm not ready to do that." And Alex says, "Well, if I can't have you, I don't want to be here." And he calls her up and he tells her that he attempted suicide. She comes over and she sees him in January where he had taken a knife
Yeah.
and he'd cut his wrists. He tells her about what that meant to him. He tells her about how easy it was to use that knife because he says he likes suffering. He doesn't feel pain. And she's conflicted.
Now, I just have a logical issue with that because that's a contradiction, right? Like, if you don't feel pain, then you can't be suffering. So
Jason is actually there with her.
It was
Jason
very
helps to bandage up Alex's arms. And she's conflicted and she's back again saying, "Okay, I will continue to be with Alex." During this time, she reads different portions of Alex's.
one of the pyramids.
I just want to read some of these to you as it evolves through time. In November, Alex writes, "I was further contaminated. This is all mutated. I wanted to be happy, but felt unworthy. I wanted to be loved, but refused to believe it possible. I wanted to be alive, but lacked a heart. And you hurt me. I hated myself through you. And you were a living death. Everything I said came to be a lie. I had to escape the monster I became with you."
So it was so interesting. I'm sure you guys are already going to pick up on this, but this can be taken two different ways, right? This is why this case is one that a lot of this, right, in terms of the journaling, for example, right, the interactions that, like, it's really a good example of something that's for the jury because it could really be interpreted, depending on the facts of the case, right, and the evidence. You might be like, yeah, well, it can only be obviously interpreted one way, and then that would be, of course, how the jury would reach a verdict, for example. But you can see how someone could read this and say, "Oh yeah, that's clearly pointing to her as being one way," but then you could also see it the other way. So
You did not
agree.
deserve it.
I agree.
Nor did I.
I agree. But you can see how they're using it. Right?
Later in November, he writes, "I mistook the innocent play, your
Right?
desire for my hunger. I saw cannibalism where you asked to be seen erotically."
I mean, again, metaphors, I would say.
Again in November, "I destroy what I find. I break things apart to see what they're really made of, for better or for worse. I have a habit of breaking people's lives, of destroying and analyzing them. I am attacking this for the sake of my sadism. In December, he writes, I have been cautious, gentle, tender, and careful. Little do most know that this is precisely how one makes their way around in the dark. In the dark, one touches more to learn than to manipulate. Devoid of sight, we use our hands to explore. Utterly vulnerable. Vulnerable explanation is intentionally gentle, but out of self-concern. Aggression backfires when obstacles are unknown. Hunting in the dark, as he likes to call it. In December, he says, I am in so much pain because you love me, and still you hope to abandon me to my loneliness again. In February, as their relationship is dwindling. For to give purely to suicide can involve a cessation of violence, but it is the obligation to not die oddly. I must commit violence against another to provide for this demanding other. This forces me to murder in order to provide. I am doing it either way. This demanding other has taken my redeeming suicide from me and doomed me to torturous guilt.
You know, the thing is, though, Andrea, Kit Smith's kind of nailed a description, I think, of him. Remember, he was, early 20s, right? Hipster. You have to picture hipster. And I know you're also in Ireland, but I would imagine you guys have hipsters there as well. But you have to imagine this is a young 20-something year old, 24-year-old, right? A philosophy major in school who basically lives for the vast majority of the hours of the day, right? Works at and hangs out in this coffee shop 24/7, where apparently this coffee shop is known to be frequented by free thinkers and writers and philosophers. So when you put it in that context, this makes sense. This is his thing. Like, the writing in the journal isn't the way that other people write in the journal because of the fact that he's like a philosopher, and philosophers by their nature are, pretty much are writers, right? So, and he's a big reader. He's a reader and a writer and a philosopher. So, and I think too, I've found that when you do a lot of like fancy writing and shit, like even if it's for school, it tends to change how you think. Have y'all noticed that? Like, I remember when I was writing like fancy research papers and stuff in school, it's like I would tend to think the way I was writing, even if the way I was writing was like fancy for a research paper. So I could see how, like, if you're used to kind of like writing in a certain way to practice good writing skills, that would be kind of how you think, and then vice versa, if that makes sense. So, it's like your inner monologue or whatever.
That's her ex-boyfriend. She doesn't want to commit fully to him. She doesn't get the solace that she needs from Jason. Jason leads sometime in February to go off on his National Guard duty.
That's right.
She's not hitting it off with Alex. They have another friend, a John Hansen.
Are you guys ready?
And John Hansen.
Are you guys ready for another character? Another friend, John Hansen. So we have Ezra, we have Jason, we have Alex, and now we have John Hansen. They have, you guys, are y'all ready? Are y'all ready? All right, curveball number whatever, right? This is the next curveball. We've got another dude. Y'all, it's gonna get crazier.
Get
crazier. Buckle up, guys.
John Hansen is older. He brings over alcohol, brings her to his house where they have alcohol, and she drinks. She gets drunk. She gets throw up drunk. Pass out, throw up drunk. After which, John Hansen and her have sex. The next day, still hungover, they go back to her place where they again have sex. Jason comes back home a couple of weeks later, and he's looking at Ezra's phone, and he finds this texts back and forth. And he confronts Ezra, pushes her on the bed, asks her about sex with John Hansen. He calls John Hansen his friend. demanding to know why his friend would have sex with his gal, as if it's his possession. John Hansen denies it, and Jason Mengel is wound up. Very, very upset. Jason and Ezra go back to their friend Josh's place, and Josh is worried about Jason. Worried what Jason is going to do based upon Jason's words, Jason's demeanor, everything else. Josh decides to call the police. I'm worried about what Jason might do. So the police are called. The police come over and they start talking to Jason like, what's going on? What are you so upset about? And Jason says, my girlfriend was sexually assaulted. The police ask to talk to Ezra. Ask Ezra if she wants to talk there in presence of Jason or down at the station. She doesn't want to talk about it in front of Jason. She leaves with the police officer, and eventually they agree a couple of days later to speak. She speaks with Detective Brown about this allegation that Jason made about a sexual assault. And Ezra tells Detective Proc about being there, getting drunk, throwing up, having sex after throwing up. And at the end of that, Detective Proc tells her, well, if under those conditions, if you're too drunk,
That's the abortion.
that's a sexual assault. Sometime between the time the police are called and Ezra speaks with Detective Proc about that and is told that it's a sexual assault, Jason Mengel confronts these other two men, confronts Alex, confronts John, and there's a big blow up at Racy's. A big blow up in which
Guys.
the men are all yelling and Ezra's inside. After that, Ezra breaks up with Alex, says, we're done. I can't do this anymore. She doesn't want anything to do with John Hansen. She goes home. She goes back to Stanley, where she stays with her mom, she stays with her dad. And it's during this time in March, after she meets with Detective Proc, that she's given information, victim witness information, pamphlets about counseling, about getting your voice back, about reclaiming who you are as a person, your empowerment. And she begins to journal and to talk about her life and the traumas that she has suffered in that life. And in the end, she says, I want to be Ezra McCandless again. She's at her adoptive dad, Joe Shane Carlin's house, and she's telling him about this. She's pouring out all of this emotion about what has just happened, the intensity of what's going on for this young lady. And he says, kind of a seize the day moment, kind of a nice dad pep talk, life starts now. Life starts now. Whatever it was yesterday, whatever that was, be done with that. Be the bigger person, be the better person, starts now. So March 22nd comes along. She's up. She's an adult. She has her own car. She finds the keys and she decides to go to Eau Claire to get some stuff done in Eau Claire.
But we know she's not supposed to drive it.
She's got appointments later in the day. She's got appointments tomorrow. There's no plan to do anything other than to go and see some people, talk about her feelings. She goes to Racy's, gets a coffee. She sees her friend Max, who she wants to exchange paintings with, and she tells Max, I'm going to go see Alex later. She drives over to Max's house. They exchange this painting. She comes back. She's back at Racy's, drops off Max, says she's going to go to Alex's. She goes to Alex's, where she has this meeting with Alex. The police arrive, and everything's good.
Now we're getting to the events the day of the murder and what transpired, according to the event.
But she'll tell you that just before the police arrived, when her and Alex were having this conversation, in which she wants to confront when she wants to create, and when she wants to continue different parts of the relationship. That when Jason interrupts, Jason walks into Alex's home, walks into Alex's bedroom, and interrupts that conversation between Ezra and Alex, she can see everything changes with Alex. Alex never liked, as he called it, her gun-toting boyfriend. And there's some tension between Alex and Jason. And Ezra says, we'll leave. Let's go talk someplace in public. That's fine. We don't need to be in his bedroom. Let's go talk someplace in public. She sees the police. Everything's good. And off they drive. Ezra's driving. Alex is in the passenger seat. As they're driving along, Alex starts talking to her, telling her things about your back. You still love me. You abandoned me. And he's reaching out to touch her, and she's getting anxious. She's getting nervous. She's had that happen in the past where sometimes she gets anxious driving and she doesn't want to drive. They pull over, they switch, they continue driving in the random direction they are, which is basically just on County Road E, straight out of Eau Claire, going west towards Menard.
I'm sure there's going to be a point to that, but that detail about her getting anxious with the driving and then they switch drivers, that's a little detail where it's like, I don't know yet. And I'm sure we'll learn why, but why was that included,
At some point, the car turns off E onto 430th Street, and it's stopped in front of that muddy driveway. I don't know if I have that picture up yet. That muddy driveway. And they sit and they talk, and they decide, maybe we'll go up there, we'll park, we'll drive, or we'll walk, we'll talk. She doesn't know anything about a knife. She's anxious, but Alex has at that point never been threateningly violent. He's choked her during sex in the past. He's hurt her during sex in the past. But not outside of that. So she was anxious but not afraid. Then they drive up in the car.
Andrea, apparently the reason she went to go meet up with him was to return a bookmark and a heating pad.
Gets stuck. You'll hear from a witness who says on the one side the roadway is out of the sun, so it's still frozen. You can drive up that little section of the hill because it's frozen. But once you get over the top, the back side is on the south exposure, and there it's softer. There's mud, and the car gets stuck, and they try to get it unstuck. They drive into the grass. They get it stuck in the grass, and they're switching drivers. Ezra's in the driver's seat now saying, let me try to get it stuck. And then they finally drive forward, and then you'll see the pictures. It's just stuck for good. The wheels are just buried in mud next to a trailer. They get out. He's smoking some cigarettes. They're wandering around, trying to see if they can get it unstuck, trying to figure out what they can do. She doesn't have a phone. She just simply doesn't have a phone. Alex has the phone. It's Alex's phone. Whether there's reception out there or not, I don't know. Maybe we'll hear from a witness that there is. I don't know. But she doesn't have a phone. She sits on the edge of the trailer and she's contemplating, what are we going to do? Alex is off someplace else, and Alex comes up and he hugs her. And she's uncomfortable. She's uncomfortable with that hug. But she's there with that hug, and Alex says, why don't you go back in the car? Why don't you go lay down? Why don't you go there? She's back in the car looking for stuff, laying down. And then that begins. Alex terrified her. He cut her. He strangled her. You're going to hear a lot of evidence about what Ezra did after this traumatic event. And I will submit to you that yes, you should consider that evidence, right? But obviously the order of the events chronologically makes it undeniable that her behavior and statements afterward are a result of the previous trauma. That's what happens. If it's not the traumatic event of fighting for her life, then what is this? How did she get to here? How did she get to PTSD with post-traumatic stress disorder? Is the state's theory that she's faking and feigning that whole thing as part of some big calculated plan? Despite a diagnosis with post-traumatic stress disorder with aspects of derealization and depersonalization that our expert will tell you about? That'll be for you to decide. But before we go over her post-trauma behavior and statements, I just want to tell you a little bit about our experts and how the brain functions, because that's going to be a huge part.
I do want to say real quick, that was a smart move of him already empowering the jury. That'll be for you to decide. Smart move.
Part of this, how trauma impacts the human brain, right? We're going to have two experts, right? One of which is a man called Dr. James Hopper. Dr. Hopper got his PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Massachusetts in Boston. I just want to tell you a little bit about who Dr. Hopper is and what he knows. He's a national expert. He was a fellow at the Trauma Center in Boston University. He was a fellow at the Behavioral Research Laboratory at the McLean Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Since 2006, he's had different roles at the
This is unique, guys. I don't know that I've heard this in a trial, maybe ever, where in the opening statements they talk about the credentials of the expert witnesses. Have you guys ever heard that?
Harvard Medical School as an instructor, a clinical instructor, a part-time instructor, and a teaching associate. Nationally, he's gone across the country. He's done trainings for Special Victims Unit investigations for the United States military. He's done trainings to the neurobiology of sexual assaults for the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, which is supported by the Department of Justice. He's even here in Wisconsin in 2018. He did a training on sexual assault, brain experience, behavior, and memory for the Racine County Sexual Assault Response Team, including investigators and prosecutors. Dr. Hopper will tell you about the brain, how it functions. And it functions in two relations he wants to talk to you about, both in the results, I think, and in the memory. So that is how we respond, how our brain responds to trauma, and how our memory is affected by trauma. He'll talk to you about parts of the brain that I don't want to go into right now because I don't know it as much as he does, but he'll tell you about the prefrontal cortex where we make decisions and it's our rational place where we think. He'll tell you about the amygdala, but I don't know where.
One thing I wonder if the expert will testify about is the fact that she was so young. She was only 19 and that the brain's not fully developed until, I think, 26. I wonder if the expert will talk about that as well, because that's the prefrontal cortex.
There it is. The fear circuitry of our brain, which when under attack, takes over and incapacitates the prefrontal cortex of your brain. He'll tell you about the hippocampus and how that impacts memory as well as response. I want to make sure that I get this right, so I want to read some of the things that he'll say. He'll tell you people react to assaults in a baffling way, sometimes even the total opposite of what we'd expect. A traumatic event can rapidly and massively alter brain functioning by impairing rational brain regions, leaving us only reflexes and habits, the amygdala, the fear circuitry. And the trauma also affects what we remember. After a traumatic event, the survivor's memories can sound confused or unbelievable. And the memories survivors do have can be fragmentary. Some can be in great details, others not at all. Others jumbled and confused. He'll talk to you about the effects of stress on memory formation are time dependent. So when under attack, after suffering a trauma, your attention goes to certain details, but the peripheral details go away. And one of those details that goes away is time sequencing. The chronology of events is often hard to keep track of when your brain is under attack. Lastly, Dr. Hopper will testify that based on his review of the case materials, and in particular his review of some of the statements that Ezra has made, the statements that Ezra made to Detective Prock on March 23rd and March 24th, that her statements are consistent with those principles of the brain being under attack and the concepts regarding trauma and memory.
So just like with any time when you've got defendants who gave interviews and didn't, maintain their right to counsel, and they talk and then their stories change, right? As a defense attorney, you have to have explanations for that. So
this is a classic example of trauma memory processing over time. You'll also hear from Dr. Steve Benson, a local psychologist. He's from Wausau. He's on the Wisconsin Forensic Unit. He'll tell you about how that's he's on the group of people that when the judges need to appoint experts for certain things in forensic psychology, he is on that short list. And he's seen Ezra at least 3 clinical interviews and a 4th time that he's met with her. As part of the clinical interviews, he's also gave Ezra multiple psychological tests, including tests to check if she is feigning or malingering. His professional opinion is that she is neither feigning nor malingering. Dr. Benson's clinical diagnosis of Ezra includes PTSD with depersonalization and derealization. Those are parts of a dissociative disorder in which somebody is confused, shocked, or as in this part, doesn't even know their own name. They're not orientated to time, place, or situation. So again, just to get us back, his clinical diagnosis is PTSD with aspects of depersonalization and derealization. He'll tell you how his opinion is supported by other aspects of reliability, including inter-evaluator reliability, as well as multiple testing dates over long periods of time that demonstrate reliability over time. His testimony will include his opinion that Ezra's presentation was indicative of PTSD due to exposure to threatened death, serious injury, and sexual assault on March 22nd, 2018. So keeping both Dr. Hopper from Harvard and Dr. Benson, our local psychologist, keeping those responses in mind, let's talk a little bit about the post-traumatic event behavior. First, she shows up at our farmers, right? And at our farmers, Ezra doesn't know her name or what happened or really where she was or anything, other than she says, attacked.
one thing that's interesting too about the name thing, about like he's saying about the depersonalization or whatever, and she doesn't remember her name, and that being a trauma response. I do think it doesn't work in their favor that she had this history of trying out different names, right? Like that was part of her whole thing, and then she changed her name. That doesn't bode well for the name thing being a result of the trauma, you know?
Despite Ezra saying she was attacked, one of the first things you'll learn about is that the police immediately start asking about whether she was in a car accident or whether she was on any drugs. And I don't say that to blame the police. I say that the police saw something that was unexplainable to them, and they went
even the defense said, like, one of the names she tried out in high school was, and that's the way they put it. that she tried out different names or tried on different names. But one of them was Timothy. So.
Things that they knew about: car accidents and drugs. You'll see that there was a blood test that they took from her during the SANE exam. She comes back clean. No positives on drugs or alcohol. They're also part of the confusion is when they ask who did this, she says they. She uses the pronoun they, to which the police ask, were there more than one person? And it's confusing what, if anything, she says to that. She doesn't respond.
What, if anything?
But she definitely uses the pronoun they, which I submit to you that in normal conversation, probably most all of us would think that that means multiple people. But that's the pronoun that Ezra used when talking about Alex. It's the same pronoun she used when talking about Alex when she met with Detective Prock on March 1st.
I don't know why, because he
and mentioned
identified
Alex
as
and
female,
used
though.
the pronoun they. But nevertheless, it caused confusion in the investigation. They find an iPod on Ezra's person, and they're trying to figure out who she is. And they find the iPod user's name is some old college roommate who she bought the iPod from, but it's not her. Her name was Angela Merton. She's not Angela Merton. And then she finally says, I'm Monica.
Andrea, good one.
I'm Monica Carter.
Well done.
She regresses back to her childhood
There we go.
and gives them her original, essentially, birth name, which causes more confusion. All right?
Yeah, but don't you think
Nothing
she did it on
at this
purpose?
point is making sense to anybody. And the police, the ambulance, they're all trying to figure out what happened. But the facts that you'll hear are, she's crying. She's hyperventilating. She's vomiting. She's in distress. She's upset. Post-traumatic stress disorder. She then goes to the hospital. She has a SANE exam, sees some doctors, makes statements there where she's still being asked questions. And she's giving a lot of, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. The next day on March 23rd, the police come to see her. She's in the hospital. She's in the 3rd floor in the mental health department at the hospital. They come to talk to her. She didn't want to talk. She wasn't ready to talk. This was overwhelming. She didn't know she didn't need to talk. Nobody told her she could wait. She agreed to speak with the police, but she wasn't ready. Because of the trauma, because she wasn't ready, she didn't tell them everything. She didn't tell them what she knew. She handled it the only way she knew how in that moment. She told them she didn't remember. The next day, the police, they found the car. They found Alex. They go back and they speak with Ezra. They don't immediately tell her of their findings. They have an open conversation with her. She still didn't want to talk. She still wasn't ready. She was still overwhelmed.
I know, right?
She agreed to speak with him again, even though she wasn't ready. And because of the trauma, because she wasn't ready, she didn't tell them everything she remembered. She held back. It didn't feel safe to her.
Foreshadowing that she's probably going to change her story.
Then they told her they found the car. And then she tells them.
Because she doesn't
You'll
have a
hear
choice.
it comes pouring out, and she can tell them. Tells them what happened. This case is not about the boy being scratched in the arm. We understand everybody wants to know why she did that. We get that. But we may never know. It may be beyond our understanding. Those of us who haven't had that life-threatening situation come upon us may never be able to understand why. The experts will tell you post-traumatic stress disorder is a response to an unusual or abnormal situation. It's a response. It's not normal, it's not abnormal, it's a response to an abnormal situation. We can all agree that in everyday life, scratching any word in your forearm, that's abnormal.
I will say that I think that this might be a misstep because he just said like it's not about the scratching of the word boy in the arm. It's not about that. Like, but now he's like making it a big deal by talking about it.
That's not everyday life. The experts will tell you that everyone's response to trauma is unique. Unique to them, unique to Ezra. In the mental health world, this behavior isn't classified as normal or abnormal. It's just a response to severe trauma. So listen to the evidence, but consider again the diagnosis and the trauma that she was under, right? And how the trauma changes everything. Scratching boy in her arm doesn't mean she's calculating. Doesn't mean it's part of a plan. It's actually proof of trauma. It corroborates that there was a life threat to her. Now the state's also going to want to tell you, well, this case is about her lying about scratching that in her arm. They've already told you that in their opening. We submit to you that the evidence will show that the fact that she lied about that unexplainable behavior and then corrected her mistake isn't proof of guilt. It's proof she's human. It's proof she was afraid to talk about this traumatic event, right? She'll tell you she knew she couldn't explain the unexplainable. She still doesn't even really know why. She was afraid he wouldn't understand. She was afraid they would judge her based upon her abnormal behavior.
This part, I think those actions are powerful.
Sure enough. They are.
Sure enough, they are. I think that's actually pretty powerful.
They're trying to discredit her based
The point is she was worried they were going to judge her about her behavior, and here we are. She's on trial for murder. I think that's actually
on
pretty
her
powerful.
unique response to trauma. Before I end, I want to talk to you about 3 particular pieces of evidence or sections of evidence that I think are going to be important for you that corroborate the trauma that she suffered in the back of that car. One of the first things is the order of events. One of the first things is his movement. Ezra says that there's a fight in the back of the car and that he's up on his feet, moving around, and then he's down on the ground when she leaves. I suspect the state's going to contest that because when the police find him, he's not down on the ground. He's back in the car. And that's something you should consider in deciding about this number that they're going to talk to you about. 16, 16, 16, 16.
Yeah.
Remember what she says about what happened in the back seat. He didn't stop. He didn't stop, and even when she stabbed him that many times, as you can see from these pictures, use your common sense. The evidence I submit to you supports he's on his feet. Gravity is affecting the blood in a downward way, showing that he's standing after he's stabbed.
So this is going to be a big point when we get to the medical examiner, because it sounds like there's kind of a discrepancy over like the order of events based on the injuries, right? Or well, that's what the defense is suggesting anyway. Like the idea that he was still standing after he was stabbed would imply, I guess, that, or suggest that he's still quote unquote attacking her, right? According to their theory. And that we, support self-defense or whatever.
That's something to think about in deciding that this happened in the back seat. He was still up and moving, and she used the amount of force that she thought was possible or was necessary for a man who was still fighting her.
Right.
He's on his feet. Second part, her clothes. You're going to see lots of pictures of her clothes. She's got 4 items of clothing on. Outside item is a flannel shirt, big jacket. You'll see 3 pieces of evidence to show that that's the outside piece of evidence. I suspect the state's going to show you 1, pictures from her at Racy's that day that you'll be able to see she's got this flannel on the outside. 2, video from the police that saw her at 10 minutes to 1 on that same day as she's sitting in the car. She's got the flannel on the outside. 3, our farmer, Don Sipple, says that she had on a flannel.
I have another one.
And that's important because one of the state's witnesses you're going to hear from, who took these pictures and was told by the prosecutors how to analyze the evidence, they've got the shirts all mixed up.
Huh.
Her outside layer is the flannel. The next layer is that sweater. You'll hear that sweater is never tested for blood. No
Great
testing
question,
for blood.
Andrea.
We'll ask witnesses whether they observed any blood, and I submit to you the reason it wasn't tested is because nobody saw any blood on it. There's not blood on her sweater. There's blood on this shirt. Right? That's the shirt underneath the sweater. So one of the things that the state's order of event is basically their theory, as they stood up here and said, is she stabs him, and then she cuts up her own clothes, and then she runs off. We submit to you that couldn't have happened. If that shirt isn't cut, if that shirt is together during the knife fight, where's the blood on it? Where's the blood on it if then afterwards her hands, as they said, which would be dripping in blood, grab the shirt to go and cut it herself? Where's the blood on it? That shirt was cut before anybody took a knife to anybody. Alex had the knife and cut that first. You see the next shirt, which we talked about, and it has blood on it. How did the blood get past the uncut sweater to the next layer if it wasn't already cut? That's a question that you should be asking. Unfortunately, you'll never know whose blood that is. Because despite all the other things that they're going to bring for you here to test, they never tested that. The reasonable hypothesis is that's his blood. And how does his blood get past that sweater unless he'd already cut the sweater open? Sequence of an event, pay attention to the clothing. Lastly, today, this afternoon, you're going to hear from Dr. Mills. She's going to tell you about the stab wounds. She's also going to talk about this injury. An injury to his knee. An injury, it's an abrasion. An abrasion in which his skin has been raised. There's cuts, nicks, and bruises all over his knee. Remember his pants. They're out at the driveway in the mud. Everybody says Ezra's covered in mud. Whether there's mud or not mud on his pants is something that you'll need to decide whether it's on his knee. How would that abrasion occur other than upon a hard, dry surface? That's a question you should be asking. Because we submit to you that abrasion occurred in the back seat of the car, in the well of the car. He is on top of her. His left knee is in the well of the car. There is a fight. She's struggling for her life. He is resisting back, and his knee is on the ground, stopping her from getting out. That happens in the back seat of the car. That happens because there's a fight. That happens because he attacked her. He cut her. He strangled her.
Strangled her.
So let me just take you back to the beginning. Ezra's stumbling up to the farmer, our farmer's house.
Farmer?
She rings the bell. Our farmer comes there. He answers the door. He invites her in. Perhaps you could think of it as a duty. Not a duty in a legal sense, a legal obligation that one has, but perhaps a moral duty. A moral duty to help those in need. Our farmer accepted that duty.
Our farmer, who art
He brought her in,
John Sippel.
found her a seat, gave her a blanket. He didn't understand what was going on. He didn't need to. He saw she needed help. He gave it. He didn't judge her upon her character. He gave her the benefit of the doubt as one human being to another. And he gave her help. She just finished a fight for her life. Now, 18, 19 months later, here we are in this place, in this courtroom, on your doorstep. And in the end, we will be back up here asking you to do your duty, because the state will not prove that she was not acting in self-defense. They will not prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And they will not do that, because that's what happened. That's the evidence. They won't bring you any other evidence because it does not exist. We'll ask you to do your duty, to follow the law, and return a verdict of not guilty. Her disturbed and obsessive ex-boyfriend attacked her, cut her, strangled her. She wanted to live. She fought to survive. She's here fighting again to survive. Vote not guilty.
I have to say, I thought that was really smart when he did here, where he said, he brought it back to the beginning and he said, back to where we started from, right? Full circle. Ezra's on the farmer's doorstep, right? Again, our farmer on the doorstep. And then he says, now here she is, and she's at your doorstep. That's really powerful storytelling, right? So you couldn't ask for more different styles of opening statements, right? The state was like less than 30 minutes. Completely, I mean, it's really interesting, right? Candace says, I wonder what our farmer thinks now. Don't worry, we're going to hear from our farmer, and then we will find out. Dr. Bob with the logic, this is why the crime scene is so important in cases. Absolutely. Maisha said her brain can finally rest because she remembered that it was on an episode of 48 Hours. Yeah. So, if it's on right. And that's what I figured, right? That's standard stuff, right? So it's on an episode of 48 Hours. So they just give you a rundown, whatever, But yeah, that's a far cry, though, from seeing an entire trial, right? Again, like I keep saying, that's why I was surprised when you said you thought you'd seen the trial, because I was like, it's not on YouTube. So unless you watched it like when it happened, but yeah,
yeah, that's, the 48 hours snippet is never going to give you the full picture, I would say. And I'm not saying 48 hours. I mean, I think 48 hours is they do a fine job, right? But you can't tell a full story about a trial or a case or whatever in under an hour, You can't even do it in 2 hours. Oh, yeah. I agree, Super Planner Girl. The present tense, right? He's trying to put the jury there in the moment. Imagine how you would feel if you were her, right? I think he did actually an excellent job. I think it did go a little bit long. I don't know that he needed to really go into the details about what the experts are going to testify to. However, I do understand that by doing that, what he's doing is remember, like, again, to compare it to the defense and Karen Reed, remember how they kept saying, wait for us, right? He's trying to, the idea is like, you don't want the jury to be on the prosecution side from the get-go, right? Because that's what the prosecution's going to be trying to do, obviously. So it's a similar thing, I think, with here again, where I'm saying, well, I think it went a little bit long, but at the same time, I can see the strategy in bringing up what their expert witnesses will testify to. It's to give her that credibility of like, don't write her off. Don't write her off as this behavior was unusual, right? Remember, it was a trauma response, PTSD. You're going to hear about it. So it's essentially it's wanting to give them that idea so that they're not just from the get-go on the side of the prosecution. So I get it from that point too. Okay. So in this episode, I planned on also doing the first witnesses, which are family members of the decedent. However, I do have a student. So we will have to save those for next time. However, what I will say is sometimes, like if my student doesn't show up, for example, then I don't know. What I might do is if my student does not show up, then what I might do is pop back on and do some more Depp Be Heard just for fun. Because we were going to watch some of the rebuttal witnesses. Like we were going to watch maybe like Dr. Curry, Johnny Depp, and just sort of just see how far we can go just for fun. Because I wouldn't want to just do another stream where it's just these two witnesses because it would be incomplete. So what I'll do is I'll just put them in with the next episode. So what we'll be hearing from next for this, and we'll do this tomorrow, we'll hear from these family members of the decedent, and then we're going to hear from the medical examiner. And then after that, we hear from the crime scene reconstructionist, right? And it's going to be really fun to see how different this is from Trooper Paul. But they're going to have a crime scene reconstructionist. That's how the state starts, right? That's standard, strong, open. Like here's some family members of the decedent that are going to just talk so that you can get a sense for who he was. And now we're going to go right to the medical examiner and right to the crime scene expert. And we're going to show you guys what happened. What a change, right? From like what happened with the Commonwealth. But anyway, so you guys, good night, Andrea. So you guys, I know I have more thoughts about this, and I want to hear y'all's thoughts on these opening statements. I know some people are probably still catching up on Replay Crew, but like I said, if my student doesn't show up, I'll pop back on. We'll do some Depp Be Heard, but we will continue with this trial tomorrow. And I'm so glad you guys were here. Thank you for joining me. I hope you guys are find this interesting and are excited to watch it. Like I said, I think it's got a lot. There's a lot to it. And it's, so we're just only getting started. So again, thanks y'all for being here. Thanks for being a squirrel. Like I said, I'll be back on if my student doesn't show up. So we'll see, but I'll see you guys tomorrow or tonight, maybe depending. And I'll go ahead and roll the outro.